All right. I think everything is up and running and loaded. So we'll go ahead and switch layouts and jump into today's Beatbox Jam stream. All right. What's everybody doing today? I see Sour Lad in the chat. What's up, Sour Lad? Sour Lad just says, music, man. I try. I don't know if anything I do here is legitimate music, but it is certainly music adjacent. But I hope your Sunday is going well. Starlet says, I'm good, and you? Oh, I'm doing good. Just getting stuff set up for stream and realizing I had to set some things up and trying not to do it at the last minute. So let me do kind of a breakdown for what I want to cover today. And then we will go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to throw on a real quick loop I put together right before we went live. Let's put this in the background so it's not dead silent. So a couple things for today. I gave some thought into what I wanted to cover for the sound theory discussion, since we always talk about kind of a mix of technique and things within beatboxing as kind of like a general discussion. And I think it'll be kind of an interesting thing to discuss, since we haven't really touched on it specifically in these streams. But I did want to point out, and I can mention this again if some more people show up later, there's something that I added to the redeems that is specifically for jam streams only, and I gotta remember to turn it on and off or it's gonna cause problems later. But it is related to the freestyle stuff that we do. And so I'm not asking anybody to redeem it now. You can if you want, but I'm just explaining what it is in case people are wondering when they look at the redeem list. There should be a new one on there that says Wheel of Styles, and there it is. Okay. So this one is on a lower price and a slightly lower cooldown than the regular drop a beat one. And so the plan is to only have Wheel of Styles on during jam streams. That's specifically what it's for. And so let me get the source back here. I thought I hit it, but maybe not. There we are. In fact, I'm gonna put this on my other screen. So here's how this thing works. And again, I'll explain this later if people show up and are wondering what this is. So obviously during the jam streams, we're doing a lot of just regular beats, freestyling, and the like. The Wheel of Styles is specifically for kind of like a challenge. So when you redeem this thing, I'll have to stop what I'm doing just like the regular drop a beat redeem. But now we have the wheel, which, boy, the source is not cooperating with me here. Here, I'll leave it like that. Basically, using the picker wheel, I have put a bunch of musical genres and styles, which is going to be related to the discussion a little bit later after we do the warm-up. And so whenever someone redeems this, I have to drop a freestyle, but I'm at the mercy of the randomizer. So I got to spin this thing, and whatever it lands on, I have to do a freestyle beat in that musical genre or style. And so I figured that'd be kind of a fun little twist on the formula and force me to kind of adapt and do things on the fly. And so I've got, 7 styles on here right now of things that I actively know how to do. And maybe I'll add some more later. The point is to give me a selection of things I can do. I'm not going to put polka on there because I don't really do styles in polka. But to demonstrate, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Sour Lad, I think it's on a 20-minute cooldown. So it's meant to be redeemed a little more frequently, and it's a better price than the drop a beat. In reality, people probably want to save their drop a beat redeems for non-jam streams because we're already doing beats. But we will test it here and see what the wheel says, and maybe I'll have to just pop it up every time it gets re-redeemed. But we'll make sure it's working. So, survey says. . loud. It is very loud. All right, so it is chosen synthwave. There's a kind of a variety of subgenres and styles kind of mixed in here based on the type of stuff that I've done. So like I said, I might add more to it later, but for now, we have synthwave. So let's give it a try. And this will also serve as kind of the warm up too. And we'll get into a couple more drills and stuff as we proceed. So let's do it. And I'm gonna hide this. Remember to put it back later. All right, so it looks like the redeem marks and the wheel itself works. Again, we'll find out if the cooldown I set is actually working properly. But that'll be something to kind of sprinkle in throughout the jam streams, and I just got to remember to turn it off once we're done. And so going back to the kind of discussion, we'll turn the background on. We'll be talking a little bit in the kind of sound theory and technique discussion portion of the stream today about style specifically. It's why I decided to add this new redeem in, because it's relevant. We'll be talking a bit about genres and styles and how that relates to beatboxing and kind of things I've learned since I've been doing it. And that should give us kind of an interesting discussion, especially for people who are really into music, and maybe even for people who aren't. And then from there, we'll see how long that discussion lasts and maybe mix in some technique type stuff if people have questions. And then we'll work on some drills and practice, maybe to illustrate the whole style discussion. I think that'll be kind of interesting. Thought of this topic earlier in the week and figured it'd be fun to kind of talk through and kind of throw some ideas around. Hey, Iconic's popping in. Iconic says, "Hi, Raku, can't stay, but dropping by to wish you a great jam stream. Much love. Stay awesome." All right, Iconic. Thank you for popping in to say hi. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And you stay awesome yourself, my friend. I'll catch you later. And Iconic is redeemed to hydrate. Where's my water? Alright, so let's go ahead and turn this off. And still sticking with intro and warm-up, we'll run through a couple real basic type of practice beats, and then we'll move into the style discussion for sound theory. So let's go ahead and do that. me change the caption. And we will move into discussing styles, genres, and whatnot. And it'll kind of be an extension of warm up tube. All right, put this right above my head. So, the whole reason why I decided to spend some time talking on stream for sound theory discussion is because I have gotten a question similar to this before in the past. Talking to people who might be new to beatboxing or people who are kind of looking to get into beatboxing and are just kind of trying to learn about it. The question was, how do I prepare, or what do I need to do in order to give myself tools or get into beatboxing, or do I have to be musically trained, or do I need to study a specific type of musical discipline? Kind of, how do I get into beatboxing, and what does it mean for me if I'm maybe not a musically inclined person? Hey, Edward's here. What's up, Edward? How you doing today? Welcome to the Jam stream. I hope your weekend and Sunday is going well. I know I tend to say that by default to everybody, but I do hope you're having a good day. But welcome. We're going to be discussing styles and genres as it relates to beatboxing. And so, in response to that particular question, what do I need to do to get into beatboxing? Do I need to have certain type of skill set or be trained or educated in a certain way? And the real answer, I'm not a pro by any means, but the real answer is you don't need really anything to get into beatboxing. And I say that as a person who's not extensively trained in music theory, music technique. I did mention maybe a couple streams ago that I did play trumpet a long time ago. I don't anymore. But that was the only real quote-unquote official music schooling I've had, is learning how to read music and play trumpet, and I can't read music to save my life now. But if I can get into beatboxing as someone who's not formally trained with a lot of background in music theory and whatnot, that means anybody can. And so to answer the question of what do I need to do to get into beatboxing, the only thing I would tell people, and it's going to sound incredibly basic and elementary, but the only recommendation I would give is listen to a lot of music. And I'm not saying you got to listen to every genre and style under the sun, but because beatboxing is a form of music creation, you can consider yourself the instrument. And I have seen people, not a whole lot because I don't know a lot of musicians personally, but I have seen people throw around the take that beatboxing is not legitimate music. It's just funny noises, and it's not like a violin or a flute or a piano. And I think that's a pretty false and really discrediting type of attitude, and you don't see it a lot. It's kind of more of an elitist gatekeeping type thing. But any sort of sound created in some sort of organized way to me is music. You can make a bunch of rhythmic farts, and if you really try and push it, it can be music. Hey, Crusher's here. Crusher says those people are weirdos. It's the same type of gatekeeping elitism you see in all sorts of stuff. I really don't pay much mind to that, because I don't do this to impress people or to be legitimized. I do it because it's fun and interesting. But welcome, Crusher. Maybe since we have some new folks, I can re-explain the new redeem, since we were demoing it earlier when Sour Lad redeemed it. But it's related to our style discussion, so I'll mention it again. The Wheel of Styles redeem, which is, again, something I'm intending to only have enabled during jam streams as a way for people to get some cheaper redeems on beats, as opposed to dropping $7.50 on the drop a beat. When that thing is off cooldown, which I think it's 20 minutes, so it's probably going to be in the next 5 or so. When someone redeems the Wheel of Styles, where are you? I will pull up the style wheel here, and I've got to drop a freestyle in whatever this randomizer chooses in that musical genre. And so that's going to be the challenge. And we will see how it pans out. But anyway, back to the point I'm making about listening to music. Because beatboxing relies so much on kind of ideas and creative energy and whatnot, I tell people, even if you're not a musician or someone who's been formally trained, just listen to a lot of music and know what you like and what kind of inspires you to create stuff. So maybe you're a big hip hop head, right? Maybe you listen to a lot of old school or new school or any sort of rap, hip hop, and that type of stuff. Well, that may kind of influence the style that you choose. If that's like your absolute favorite type of music and you get into beatboxing, maybe you're going to create more hip hop oriented beats. I know that's kind of where I started because it was the easiest thing to translate to the basics when you're first learning beatboxing instruments and learning how to get started and construct beats. It translates pretty easily to hip hop because it came from the hip hop culture and community, right? And so just doing something really simple as you're learning the basic instruments, like a hip hop style beat, maybe something like and that's a really kind of generic, basic type of hip hop beat. But even if you are using that as kind of a base, and let's say you have a favorite song by a hip hop artist, and you want to try to recreate that beat as a way of learning how to apply the different techniques and tools in the beatboxing set. Well, that gives you a good place to start, and you could say, all right, I want to try and emulate this style of one of my favorite songs and see if I can construct a beat that's similar. There's nothing wrong with that. I would say you want to make sure and try and evolve your own style and put your own twist on things. Don't just copy things that exist. You can if you want to get more into like the covers territory, but as far as a building block for figuring out how you want to get into beatboxing and the styles that are at your disposal, working off of something that you like and are familiar with is a good way to kind of build that foundation. And so I tell people, just listen to a lot of music, learn how to pick out different parts of something. I'm not saying you have to be able to be like a producer and dissect every little bit from a song, but even just the rhythms, being able to listen to something that's like a techno-ish song and you're hearing kind of the steady type of kicks, like a, and if you listen to some older techno, you could hear how it's done in layers as far as when the instruments come in. So it may start with just a simple kick, just a, and then a hat comes in, like, and after a few bars, then a snare comes in. So it would go. Interestingly enough, it's the same way I tend to create things on the loop, probably because it's a learned behavior. But just listening to how existing music builds or is built together gives you a pretty good idea of how to tackle that from a beatboxing perspective, because you kind of treat yourself like the producer. You've got to create a sound or series of sound and put them all together and figure out a way to make it into a cohesive thing, so you're not just throwing out random sounds all over the place. You've got to establish a rhythm. You've got to establish bass. You got to put other types of high-end sounds depending on what you're doing. And so you pick that up just by listening to things that are out there in the wild, things that people have created. And it gets kind of interesting as you just sort of use little bits and pieces of inspiration from here and there. And I know for me, since, again, come spring, I'll have been doing this about 3 years now. Started in spring of 2019. It's probably not news to any of you since we've been hanging out for a while, but I personally listen to a ton of music. All sorts. The only genre I don't listen to is country. I have lived in Texas for a long time. I was surrounded by country. That's the only type of genre I can't do. Anything else, I will usually be able to listen to or tolerate. But I've always been surrounded by a lot of different types of music. Contemporary. I do like classical, but I'm not knowledgeable on it. I couldn't tell you like a lot of really famous composers or more obscure composers, but I do like classical music. I think probably the genre that's influenced my beatboxing style the most, even though it started with kind of hip-hop type stuff, is probably electronic music. And that's probably not, again, really surprising because I do a lot of stuff that's kind of like dance or techno, or more specifically for heavier basses, like dubstep, kind of more aggressive drop type things because it's kind of suited towards my skill set that I've learned. And we talk about the different basses and things like your throat bass, vibration bass, your vocalized chest, and also by extension inward bass, low end sounds you can use for things like drops. I think that's really interesting because if you think about it from a composition standpoint for dubstep ish or dubstep adjacent type of things, you have kind of like a set rhythm and then there's always a build up. Well, maybe not always. In most cases, there's a build up to the drop. And so part of the challenge is figuring out a way to take your bass rhythm, and if you want to do something that's going to have heavy bass and drop type stuff, okay, how are you going to build around that to lead up to it? And then how are you going to structure the actual drop itself so that it's, unique to whatever it is you're creating? And so kind of like an example, I think this is probably inspired by a couple different things I've heard, but I couldn't pinpoint one specifically. But if you're talking about kind of like a regular type of build up for a dubstep-ish type song, usually the rhythm will pick up. So if it's maybe something like that's the bass rhythm, and then it's going to transition to a build up to a drop. It might pick up in speed, so instead of just a, it would go. And what I've noticed is really common, and I don't know if there's like a playbook for how people used to do this in the past, but the snare will usually come in as a slow series of hits and then start to pick up as the bass rhythm and the kick rhythm picks up as the build up to the drop picks up, and then hits the peak, and then you have the drop right after. So you might have something like and then drop. And so kind of the interesting thing that I've been trying to play around with a little bit when working on that type of style is, what's the bass rhythm? How's it going to switch up as it creates that build? And then after, how do you structure the drop so that it's going to be really clearly emulating that particular style of music? And the really low, kind of distorted, heavier bass techniques really lend themselves well to doing that, which is why I think that's probably my favorite style to kind of create in. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best overall, but it's the one I find really interesting because you can do things like a sustained or a series of note changing basses in the drop. You can do kind of a faster rhythm. So if you were doing like a where the rhythm doesn't change, but the heavy bass is what's kind of drawing your ear towards that heavyish drop. Or you're doing a mix of that plus a more rapid rhythm and using kind of like a distortion or an interruption of the sound to break it up and give it kind of more of a different rhythm to just the bass, drums, and percussion line. So instead of the you might get something that sounds like and you're using just sharp, quick movements with the tongue to break up the sound, so it's getting that more rapid hit instead of just the slower single notes of the bass line. One sec. And so kind of plugging a lot of that stuff into the formula for how you want to create the different patterns or ultimately what might become a routine is mostly just experimenting around. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of the stuff that I kind of tinker around with or take some inspiration from has come from things I've heard in other songs. I try not to just wholesale rip off, this was for example, like a Skrillex drop. I don't really want to do that because people are going to say, that's just the thing from that one song. But that particular technique or style can definitely be adapted and repurposed and made your own when it comes to plugging different things into what you create in beatboxing. And so, kind of to segue into the next part of the discussion about styles, another thing that's kind of interesting, or something I've seen some of the pros in their routines kind of play around with, is the idea of style switching mid song. And it's not really something I do a ton. I tend to do more variation on rhythms and kind of minor tweaks. I don't necessarily go like 180 as far as styles go. But if you're really adept at putting things together on the fly, you can totally compose things that way in beatboxing. You know, if you wanted to have something that starts as kind of like a smooth, really mellow, kind of jazzy type of rhythm, and then you have like a style switch that goes into something more hip hop ish, or something that goes a little bit harder as far as the rhythm and sounds, you could totally do that. You just have to kind of stitch it together so that it's seamless and doesn't sound like two different songs stapled together, like kind of Frankenstein's monster, just mishmashed together. And doing transitions and stuff like that isn't something I'm super good at, but it is definitely something that you can kind of practice and see, because there are a lot of artists out there that do kind of a mix of styles, and so you're listening to their music and you get kind of like style whiplash, right, when you're listening to it. A really good example of a band that I really got into in the last year or so, just thanks to YouTube recommendations, is a band from Germany called Electric Callboy. And they're a metalcore band by roots, but their style is very, very interesting, because it's kind of like a Euro dance hardstyle hybridization with metalcore. If you've never heard of Electric Callboy, check them out. They're a lot of fun to watch and listen to. But you'll be hearing it, and it might be starting kind of like a dance electro type song, and then you just get like really aggressive, kind of more like growls and metalcore type heavy vocals, like non-clean vocals, and then it goes back to like dance again. It's their songs are, again, very interesting and really fun. And so you can kind of take that philosophy and apply that to things like beatboxing too, if you are really good at kind of jumping between styles and making it seem seamless. I think the only real example I've done, or have done consistently, would be going from something a bit slower, like a dubstep-ish type of composition, and then switching to like a drum step type of composition. So things with a heavy build up and heavy drop, and then switching to a drum and bass. And that's what drum step is, essentially. It's a mix of the heavy stuff with dubstep plus the faster rhythms and types of bass hits and composition for drum and bass. So you have slow, aggressive, heavy, but also switching to a faster, more kind of rapid beat with like a drum and bass. You know, your simple Crusher says drum step isn't where you step on drums. Not that kind of drum step. We're talking about things in the realm of, you know, because there's a bazillion subgenres of dubstep. I can't keep track anymore. I know you're making a joke, but I think drum step's also that type of choreography you see in like marching bands, like drum lines. But we're talking about like the EDM version. And so you could do something as simple as constructing a really kind of heavy series of build-ups and things, you know, in a dubstep type of style, and then instead of doing like a final drop, you build up into a style switch that goes into like a drum and bass. So if we were to take our previous example, let me do like kind of an extended series of patterns to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about as far as trying to make the style switch seem pretty seamless. And we'll see if I'm communicating this well for people that are listening. So what I'll do is I'll start with a simple dubstep-ish rhythm, do like a simple build up to a drop, do the drop, then re-loop back to the build up, and instead of doing the drop again, try and go into a drum and bass type of rhythm. So it's like half of a song-ish, and we'll see if it works. So we're starting off. And so, taking that really kind of simple example, I think for a kind of dubstep ish beat transitioning to drum and bass, it really is kind of more plug and play than some of the other ones because you can swap out a drop for a rhythm change and a style change over to drum and bass and not have it be jarring. Because I've heard that a lot. Again, I think it's just considered the overall envelope of drum step. The experts can tell me if I'm wrong, but because it still functions on a build up, and that's what I've heard the most, it'll be like a build up, but instead of a drop, or it's a different type of drop that's changing rhythm and going into a faster drum and bass type of rhythm. That seems to be how that really works, and it's pretty easy to sort of transition there. And it also helps that you can use the same instruments too, unless if you wanted to, you could switch. You could swap snares out, so instead of the PF snare when you're doing the drum and bass bit, you could switch it to like an outward K. So it'd be like you could do that too. I think it would be a little bit more jarring because it sounds like a different song as opposed to the same song, same instruments, just a different style. And so that's kind of more of a personal preference on whether or not you want to make it that dramatic of a switch or stick with the same instruments but change the style and rhythm and make people focus on that when they're listening. And so that's kind of the experimentation that comes with kind of the experimenting with styles, figuring out what works and what feels kind of, again, seamless and is going to move from the different sections of the song. And so it is interesting that you can kind of approach pattern construction, routine construction when it comes to styles in beatboxing, not necessarily mechanically or mathematically, but you can kind of break it into manageable pieces and say, all right, if I don't want to have anything really complex necessarily, but I want a start, middle, and end of my song that I'm going to be creating. And you start with those basic jump off points and say, what's the intro going to be? How's it going to start up? Then how's that first block going to transition into the next one? And then how is it going to outro at the end? So again, start, middle, end, if you're keeping it super simple. And then maybe you are expanding out different sections. So start, transition to middle, or transition to second major part and then the middle. And you kind of build it out that way in reverse. And I have never really asked the pros in the beatbox scene if that's the way they do it. Maybe it's a little bit more organic where they're like, I want to do a song. Here's a general feel and I'm going to put it together. Or maybe they're writing full sheets of all the stuff. I don't know. But going back to the original discussion about what do you do in order to give yourself the tool set and the ability to have things at your disposal for beatboxing, again, just listen to a lot of music. See what's out there, see how people do things like creating rhythms and instruments and how they put them together and changing different sections of the song, and then see how that sort of influences your style and how you want to create things. And I understand not everyone is really into music, but if you want to get into beatboxing, it really does help to have that sort of reference material so that, one, it helps you choose what kind of style you want to develop for yourself, but also it gives you kind of a jump off point for seeing how people are doing that when they're creating the things that you're listening to. And so that's kind of a basic summary of what I wanted to go over when it comes to styles. I think it's really interesting how beatboxing, because there's so many different techniques and instruments and ways to create sounds, all you really need to do is say what is going to be helpful for creating the style that I want. And so if you were doing something like synthwave, all right, what's going to give me kind of a distortion for that kind of synthy bass and the synthy melodies that you hear in a synthwave song? Maybe you're doing something like a lip bass, which is what I tend to do for a quote unquote synthwave song, since that's what was redeemed earlier. And that's how you're getting like the. And that's just throat bass plus a lip distortion filter, and you're getting that same kind of distortion. Oh, and I see Crusher has redeemed drop a beat. All right. I guess that means it's my choice, right? I'm going to assume, well, you folks can tell me if the cooldown on the wheel is working. It should be off cooldown now, but if someone drops a regular redeem for drop a beat, then I'll just pick something. But on regular non Beatbox streams, that wheel one's not going to be there. It's only for the stuff we do here. I just need to remember to turn it off. It's all right. Let's get something for Crusher. All right, get some more water. And so, kind of wrapping up the discussion of styles, and feel free to ask any questions, again, related to the stuff we talk about, or beatboxing in general. Again, it's an open forum for questions. You folks can ask those whenever they come up. But I think the idea of experimenting around with different styles and genres of music is definitely something I'm going to try and prioritize. Maybe we can flow that into the BGM brainstorming session that we're going to do for the latter part of the stream. But I definitely want to avoid getting kind of pigeonholed into one type of sound and style. And it's really easy for that to kind of become a trap in beatboxing, because when you're practicing and grinding and trying to learn different techniques, you'll automatically kind of gravitate towards what's familiar and what's kind of comfortable and what you have a lot of experience either listening to or creating. That's not really new, but the idea of kind of branching out and messing around with different things that maybe are outside your comfort zone is good practice, because it's going to make you more well-rounded, and it's going to give you kind of more tools and allow you to kind of adapt faster if you're trying to create stuff on the fly. I think the thing that I want to kind of prioritize, in addition to making sure I don't get stuck in a style, is getting kind of more in the weeds on rhythms and tempos, because again, I couldn't tell you some of the more advanced time signatures because I'm not classically trained in music. I could tell you what a 4/4 sounds like, and I could tell you what a 2/2 or a 3/4 sounds like, but like a 6/8 is one that I can recognize if someone plays a rhythm, but trying to do it on the fly, like in a beatboxing thing, I couldn't tell you. I would have to emulate what I hear and then say, okay, so this number of beats would correspond to something like a 6/8, and kind of go from there, or like a 7/8. That one's even weirder. And so what you hear in a lot of the pros, and when they do either competitions or shout outs or wild cards or whatever, sometimes you'll hear them bust out a lot of really irregular tempo type routines, or even funky things with keys and harmonizing if they're doing a more melodic one. And that's definitely something I want to kind of learn more about and get into, because it builds a lot more on the musical theory side, and forces you to kind of think outside the box and kind of in a non standard sense, if that makes sense the way I'm saying it. Edward says a lot of the oldies are in 6/8. Again, my problem is I can recognize a time signature when I hear someone do it, but I can't recreate it just from my brain if it's the more kind of irregular ones. And it's probably hard to describe for someone who's not a musician, but like a 4/4 would be something like, and that might be 2/2. Anyway, it's the standard 4 count, right? A lot of the stuff I do is 4/4. And a 3/4 to me, the way I can pick out a 3/4 is like a waltz tempo. Like a, and I believe most people have explained it to me, for things like going from a 3/4 to a 6/8, you're just doubling the amount of beats in one series of measures. I just couldn't tell you what it's supposed to sound like until I hear it. And that's something I'm trying to work on. And interestingly enough, we talked in previous streams about practicing with a metronome. Metronomes are really good for that. And that's what I need to do a little bit more often, because you can just set the time signature on the metronome at the BPM you want, and then you'll hear the amount of beats counted out per measure, and you'll know, okay, this is what I'm working with per thing when I'm constructing a rhythm. And then that's how you learn. I just haven't quite gotten my head around some of the more weird ones yet. But I think that's, again, more on the music theory as opposed to beatbox theory side of the discussion, but it's definitely relevant. If you want to give yourself some interesting tools that are going to make you stand out, learning how to master rhythms and tempos of things that are less standard is going to be something that is, again, going to stand out more. And so that's kind of a bit more advanced, or not, depending on your background. But it's an interesting discussion. I don't know if I've heard any, now that I think about it. I don't know if I've ever heard a pro beatboxer routine that's a waltz. I know people have definitely done 3/4 type of time signatures for things they've done, but actually doing like a waltz would be interesting. I don't know how you do that in beatboxing to make it sound good, but I don't know. Maybe it's a long-term project. And I see we got a stretch redeem from Sour Lad. Oh. And so let's see. Before we switch over, because I want to spend kind of a bit more time working on the BGM stuff today, because I feel like the last stream we did, I think we only got one song completely finished, and I would like to kind of tinker around with some things and spend more time just brainstorming ideas, and I'd rather focus on that than a lot more of just the drills and practice stuff. But I did want to spend time talking about styles, genres, and how that flows into beatboxing. One, because I've gotten kind of questions related to that in the past, and two, because it does give me a reason to explain the new redeem, which, again, it'll be active for the entirety of the stream, and I just need to remember to turn it off. And as I think of other genres and styles, I will add to that, because there's, again, 7 right now. I'm hoping I don't get the jazz one, because it is really difficult for me to think of jazz type of rhythms and stuff in beatboxing. I got a couple I can kind of pull out of thin air. But that's probably the one I feel the weakest on. There's also a trap one on there too. I kind of know some of the more generic type of trap stuff, so that's not quite as bad. But let's see. I guess we can switch gears. Maybe on some streams in the future we can get back to the freestyle challenge type stuff. I know I haven't done that in a while, and I think what was my personal best? Like 20 minutes? 2028? Oh man, that's gonna be tough to beat. When we eventually try that again, I'll have to try and get to like 25 minutes. Eventually, it'll be something like I'm sitting here doing a nonstop freestyle for an hour, and that'll make these jam streams a lot easier or a lot longer. One of those two. All right. So let's move on to BGM brainstorming, and I need to sit down. So let me move my mic and get my chair, and we will switch gears and come up with some ideas for some BGM tracks. First, I'm going to fix the caption, then I'll move on my stuff. All right. Oh, it feels good to sit down. So let me clear this off. I'll put my mic right here. It should be relatively easy to hear me. And hopefully I don't mess up my actual mic settings. I kind of dropped the EQ levels down for today because it's caused some distortion in the past. And as far as I could tell, people haven't been having issues hearing me. But if anything is weird on the playback, let me know and I can adjust it. But we will start with a completely blank loop. And now we got to think about style. Again, we're just talking about for a good portion of an hour, genres and styles. And I don't remember exactly what we did last time. I'd have to go back and look a few entries ago. But let's try and construct something that's got a bit more of a constant and rapid rhythm. Not so fast like a breakbeat or anything like that, but I was thinking kind of like a steady. We're not going in any weird time signatures on this one necessarily until we do like maybe a switch up later, but something that's got kind of a driving rhythm to it, like a do I want to do a double kick? We can try that. So I'm going to try and record a couple of clean loops, and then we'll start plugging in different layers to the percussion just like we normally do. Let's see. Okay, I think I can get it to be a little bit cleaner on the loop. I'll try again. And I'm going to turn some reverb on for this. There we go. Now for like a hat, maybe we could go open and close. We haven't done that in a while. So maybe something that's going to be a little bit more kind of swing-ish. We don't want to get necessarily into like a swing rhythm. But maybe something like... And let's see, put a little bit less reverb on this one. Okay, I think that layers in pretty nicely. I kind of backed off a little bit on the hat to make it more in the background. We could add some lower bass hits for the kick itself. Maybe do like a throat kick on the first and third. Not all of them, so it sounds like there's a lower bass kick emphasis on a couple of the notes, but not all of them. So I wonder how that would work. Let's give it a try. A little bit subtle, but that was kind of the effect I was going for. There's just kind of an alternating emphasis on a couple of the kicks in the middle. Okay. Now, bass line. One thing I'm going to be kind of experimenting around with today that I've been playing around with on some of the stuff I've been recording off stream is using the slicer input effect to change how things are recorded. So not at the track level necessarily, which we have done in the past, where we kind of chop up the entire song when we turn the effect on. Instead, I'm turning it on as I'm recording the sound. So instead of like a constant, bass line that might go, it's breaking it up using a set rhythm when slicer's turned on. So it ends up sounding more like and rather than me trying to do that manually and running the risk of being slightly off beat or being slightly out of sync, I'm relying on the actual preset to do it for me. And then you can adjust the rhythm, so it's not necessarily 1 2 1 2 1 2. There's like a 1 1 2, a 1 1. There's 14 of them. How many slicers are there? There are 20 patterns that are subtly different rhythm-wise that affect whatever it is you're inputting. And it tends to work good on sustained notes, whether they're low-end notes or higher-end synths or melodies. And so you can kind of create a sequencer effect if you time your melody progressions correctly with the rhythm. And it's kind of a neat way to change how something's being recorded and give it kind of more of like a bouncy-ish feel without, doing it manually again. And I don't even remember what pattern 20 sounds like. We can try it with like a generic bass line just to see what it sounds like. And the thing that's challenging is I can't hear the playback in real time. If I was doing this with a synthesizer and playing the notes, I'd be able to hear the effect. But I can't hear it when I'm recording it directly with just me. I have to wait till it plays back in the loop to hear what the rhythm or the effect is. And so pattern 20 with the slicer is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. That's interesting. We might be able to make that work if we go into a guitar to bass, heavier lower bass line, and then give it a couple progression notes, so it's not just a standard or flat melody. Maybe go up or up down or up down and steps. We could see how that is affected by the slicer effect, and then see if we like the kind of sound and if it makes the whole kind of bouncy nature of the rhythm kind of complement. Sour Lad's back. Welcome back, Sour Lad. Let's try that. So we're going to combine guitar to bass, which creates the sung notes and gives it a lot more low end, and we're going to combine it with slicer, and we're going to see what it sounds like, and hopefully it's not terrible. So let me turn guitar to bass on, and I won't be able to talk till I actually record it. All right, let me turn my mic back on here. So that creates an interesting effect, but I don't know if I necessarily like it as far as how the rhythm goes. Because pattern 20 on the slicer, it sounds like it puts a harder emphasis on one beat than the other. So it sounds like it goes 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, and then it's not kind of uniform. It cuts out a little bit more or less on some of the beats, so that it kind of creates kind of like a stutter, as opposed to just like a stutter in volume, rather, to kind of explain what I'm talking about. And my bad, my mic turned way up. And so here, that should be a little bit better. It's kind of an interesting rhythm, but I think it creates a bit more of like a volume stutter for the bass line. I think the notes are good, and then the progression is fine, but the rhythm I'm not really a big fan of with pattern 20. So let's clear that off, and let's see what the other patterns kind of sound like. Because again, I only ever really messed with pattern 1 on the slicer, and there might be some other ones that fit better with this type of rhythm. First, let's save. For the love of God, let's save our work. Let's see what 19 sounds like. We're basically going through the slicer command and figuring out what all of these do. So this is 19. I guess I'll just record a flat note and see what the rhythm distortion sounds like. Really similar to the other one. Maybe it's doing like a 1 2 3 and a 1 2 3. That's kind of what it sounds like, which is similar to the other one. But it does fade the volume in and out, which is what I'm kind of trying to avoid. Okay. Well, let's see what number 18 sounds like. That's interesting. It puts a stronger emphasis on the first two repeats, 1 2 3 1 2 3, and then it kind of backs off. So on the first two ones, it seems like it pushes that volume a little bit and then backs off. One, right? It's actually going 1 2 3 4. Yeah, the two ones have kind of more of an emphasis. Okay. Interesting. What about 17? Edward says, I can't really tell what these rhythms are. It's really subtly different. So this one has 3 emphasis on the ones. So this one goes 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, and then kind of fades out a little bit. Yeah, you're not going to see a huge difference in, I guess, these low or end settings. But if we were to jump down to maybe like 10, I think the rhythm switch as far as what the slicer does is going to be a little more obvious. So let me go down to like number 10. About 11. Yeah, sorry, Edward. What I was saying on the last one is it just sounds like you're moving closer to the mic and then away from the mic. With that one, it's kind of like the volume is fading in higher, and then backing off lower. That was number 10. This is number 11. This one goes 1, 2, 3, then stops abruptly. 1, 2, 3, stop. That's kind of interesting. It's like an interrupted signal. You know, we could... I'm not going to go through every single one of these 20. I think they're only going to be marginally different. I think for the type of bass line that I was trying to record, let's just go for the single notes. Pattern 1. And I think that'll be a bit more simple. And I've already forgotten the bass line melody I did, so I'm just going to try and get close. And then we will move on to the next component of the song. So I will turn on guitar to bass and do slicer pattern 1. And then we will see how this records. Alright, let's turn everything back on. I had to kind of fiddle with the level of intensity on the slicer, because the higher up on the knob you go when turning that effect on, the more it kind of cuts. And I want it to be interrupted, but I don't want it to start sounding like the sound is stopping. Because instead of just going doot 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 doot, it sounded like doot 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 doot, and there'd be almost an audible pause. So I had to do it a couple times in order to get that level down a bit. You hear it kind of almost like a pop, which is fine. That shows that there's an actual kind of signal impact, but I didn't want it to sound like it was cutting off the beat completely. Okay, so that's pretty functional, I think. Save that. We'll have to think a little bit about how we want to do some switch ups later. About scatter. A double time beat change would be interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily a sound we want on this. Okay, let me drop this a little bit down so I'm not competing with the sound. All right, now we got to think of a third instrument to layer in here. Maybe we can mess around with ring modulator and one of the other commands. I may have to turn off my EQ to free up one of the inputs so that I can add another effect. Let's see. What if we combined... Because I like the idea of trying to match up the kind of interrupted, sliced bass line and that rhythm with other instruments too, so that they're kind of all a little bit choppy and distorted. So let's see. Let's see what we got. You know, that's kind of a weird effect, but combining the ring modulator and moving it, it's kind of hard to describe, but moving the knob when that effect is active changes the kind of pitch of that weird tonal distortion. But combining that with the slicer with the same rhythm effect of it chopping up whatever it is you're inputting, it creates this kind of rhythmic alarm sound, which we've done before, but not quite at this type of rhythm. And it's something I'd want to throw in and out, but I don't dislike it. I think it's kind of interesting because it matches the bass line. What happens if we reverse it? Oh no, that doesn't sound good. So I think as an effect that's sprinkled throughout the song here or there would be good. I would not want that going constantly because that would get extremely annoying. So we do something like... maybe have it repeat twice and then cut out. So 1, 2... and then cut out, so it's there for a little bit and then leaves and doesn't, you know, overstay its welcome. Now the real question is, if we were to take the beat switch up that we were messing around with earlier, and the weird signal tone is there, what does it sound like when we do that? Oh, I see. Yeah, on that pattern, yeah, I don't like the way that sounds. I'm not gonna do that. Sounds like a train crossing alarm. All right, let's think of some other additional instruments to add. I will think a little bit for the final version of this what I want to do with that alarm. I think it's interesting, but I also think it needs to be used sparingly or it's be the most annoying song I ever made. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna look through the effects. We could try and put a lo-fi distortion, kind of a fuzz instrument on there. But would we want a higher sung note and then just put the distortion over the top of it, or would we want to combine it with something else that's going to give it kind of more of a synthesized sound? I don't use lo-fi a ton, but it is kind of interesting because it creates a really audible texture over the entire song or the sound that you're putting in. So like if I turn it on, I think if I speak normally, then it just kind of fuzzes out and you just get kind of like staticky noise. But if we do sung notes, that could be interesting. That's a little bit tough. That's a little bit tough to sort of nail because the distortion does mess with the pitch of the input. And so trying to come up with a harmonizing pitch while that fuzz is there is a little bit difficult for my ear to kind of pick apart. And it is very aggressive. I wonder if I can turn that down. Oh, I can. Oh, that's interesting. Let me mess with the bit depth and see if we can create kind of less of an aggressive distortion on lo-fi, but still have it be kind of staticky, and then maybe we can turn that into a melody we can pair with everything. So I'm going to turn it on and mess with the settings and see how it changes. There's a lot of parameters to that lo-fi that really kind of messes around with the distortion. I never really tinkered with this much. But the bit depth, I think, is what's affecting how fuzzy and how kind of distorted it sounds. But sample rate seems to affect the kind of like an oscillation with the sound itself. And I didn't know it could even do that. Huh. That's interesting, but I think it's going to be, again, a little too aggressive for an additional instrument on the track so far. Let's see what else we got. could go for the chime synth, which I've used a lot, but take the chime synth and then sequence it with a slicer effect. So we're essentially going to be using filter on A, granular delay on C, and slicer on B. So instead of it just being a single chime note, we could make it sound that it's more like a signal sequenced series of high notes, which I've never done before. I didn't even think to try that. You can see if it works. I'm going to have to mess around with my settings a little bit and then make sure I turn it all back when I try and talk to you folks, but let's see what happens. All right. Let me turn on my settings back to normal here. That combination won't work because the signal chime effect is pretty much single input. And what I mean by that is I have to do like a click sound, like a into the mic in order for it to go off, and it's not like a prolonged note that's being held. And so you can't even hear the slicer effect at all because it's trying to break up something that's very brief. And so the idea of taking that and sequencing it, it won't work that way. You'd have to do it note by note, which you could do. It'd be a lot harder, but you'd have to do like note 1 in the sequence, then overdub note 2, then note 3, and then note 4 and note 5 until you have the whole thing. And that's really difficult. I've seen some folks out there in the looper scene who are incredibly good at that. Brez is one of them. But that's not exactly going to help here. I do know, just looking at people who've been showing off the RC505 Mark II, it has a straight up sequencer plugin built in, and you can do like arpeggiated or different note run sequences just with a single command, and it's extremely powerful. I would like to get one, but I still feel like I haven't mastered this instrument yet. And so going and getting the Mark II, even though it's much more powerful, I feel like I haven't earned it yet. Edward says, what about a shaker sound? Okay. So let me clear this off. That's a good idea. So maybe like a what are you thinking? I wrote like a, what is that, eighth notes? Or you think more like kind of like a granular shaker, like a what kind of rhythm? Eighth notes, like a or you could do kind of like, again, a staggered swing, like a what I would do is I would put that on a separate layer so it could be turned on and off. What do you think? So straight eighths, and what style, like a abrupt short one. Well, we can record multiple ones and just see what sounds better. And let's put some reverb. Actually, let's put some delay, so it echoes a little bit, or so it reverberates a little, I guess. What I'll do is I'll put the rhythm and the shaker up at the same time, so you can hear kind of the combination. And that's not bad. That's not bad, actually. The delay is very subtle. I turned it almost completely off. Interesting. We're going for like a drop setup. Don't know if I necessarily want to do that for this one, but it is interesting to see how it kind of plays with the shaker sound. Yeah, I do like the way that sounds. It's interesting with the really ever so slight delay on it. And I think we probably want to tie the shaker pretty closely to the rhythm. Like, here, let me save this. So if we were to build the track in sequence, if this was being performed, maybe start with the bass line. I'll have to think about that. And then bring the main rhythm in. Kind of like a real quick transition. I don't know if I'd want to use filter. I use filter on everything. I need to break that habit a little bit. But you do kind of like a quick transition. Maybe cut out the rhythm for one like half bar, and then when it comes back in, you add in the shaker. Okay, yeah, that's good. It's a good ad. You got to be careful not to overpower everything else with that shaker, because if we boost the volume way up on it, then it's all you hear. And it sounds like someone's just shaking something directly in your ear. We don't want that. Ooh, we could try. Oh man, I gotta remember the combination of commands. We haven't done the B noise in a while. That one is, I believe that one's using panning. No, not panning delay. Let me look at my notes. I think I have it written down. Where did I put that document? Settings. maybe it was panning delay. Let me take a look. If it's set up in here, then all I have to do is turn it on. All right. Real quick, let me reset my settings. That wasn't the right effect. That's the that really kind of staticky noise you can ratchet up and down. That's the panning delay one. I could have sworn I wrote it down on one of these. Real quick, I'm gonna see if I can find that setting, but I need to fry some chicken real quick. So I'll let the beat run here, and then I will be back in 1 minute. All right, we're back. All right, I think I remember which command it was that does the effect I'm looking for, but I don't remember how to replicate it. So let me pause for a sec here. I think it's pitch bend, but I don't remember what settings I had to do. Okay. Well, we're going to try and rediscover it on the fly, and then I need to make a note to refer back to the stream later or write it down. So pitch bend, I think, is on B. Is it on A? Oh, it is. Okay. Is it pitch bend reverb? Oh, there it is. It's a specific series of settings in pitch bend. Okay. So when I have that on, if I try and talk, it gives kind of like a really metallic distortion. But if I do, I think it's just kicks, like a, then it creates that buzzing sound like a bee. And I've used that on several tracks, things like the Stinger and some of the other BGM tracks we've done. But we might be able to do some fun stuff with it here. So let's see what we can do. And I understand my volume's down because this is taking place of the spot for dynamics. But if I turn it on, just doing kicks, that's what's creating that buzzing. So we can use that. Let's see if we can plug something in here. That's kind of fun. Turn delay off. So that is combining pitch bend with the delay for a little bit of echoing reverb on it. And I found out just by messing around with the command, for pitch bend, you have to turn the knob up to get pitch. And so this is just knob high, slowly cranking down to get the descending pitch. And the delay effect is what's creating that kind of like staggered stuttery effect, which I think sounds kind of neat. All right, let me save our progress. I would be rather annoyed if I lost that because it was kind of hard to create. This is actually a similar effect that I used on Global Swarming from the BGM collection. The BGM collection. But that one I used kind of more of an echo effect. So it's similar, was descending, but it didn't have that note progression. And the tempo of the song was completely different too. Oh, interesting. Did I? I might have started off sync. Oh, no, it's okay. If we turn the reverse, then it becomes an ascending instead of descending melody. Rhythm. The rhythm is slightly off because of the delay on where it starts, though. Otherwise, it'd be perfect to just toggle that on and off. That's a shame, but I think that's fine. Just realized it's been maybe like 15 minutes since we were working on it. But that alarm, I recorded over it at some point. I think it was on track 3. Oh well. I think I like the buzzing as an effect better than that one. Okay. That's interesting. So I'm going to keep these 4 tracks and we will call this one good. Now, what would be an appropriate name for this one? Maybe something B related. Maybe kind of like a continuation from the BGM pack that we released last year. You should call it Beware with 2 E's because puns. How do we feel about puns? Not entirely committed to the idea of doing a pseudo drop there, but I'm gonna put that as a possibility for this one. I can't tell if Edward's emote is supposed to be approval or disapproval, but if we call this one Beware with 2 E's, I'm placeholdering that as a title unless you folks have any other ideas. Edward says approval. All right. So let me get my BGM list, and I'll put that on there so I don't forget. Okay. Well, we will do a final save on that one. And looking at the time, I'm kind of surprised that one took so long. That one took a little bit longer than I would have expected to do. Mostly because I had to remember my instrument commands, which is always good. But rather than start one from the beginning, maybe we can do a little bit of a preview for the last section of the stream here for you folks. I have not quite figured out where some of these loops that I've been working on are going to go, but let me jump through my queue here, and then we'll demo a couple ones that I've recorded, just so you folks can hear some of the stuff I've been working on. So let me jump back one. I gotta refix my mic settings real quick because these are synthesizer loops, and so they don't have the boosts on, and I'm not gonna save whatever I'm doing here, so it's fine. And so this one, a little bit more of an upbeat kind of hip hop type rhythm. Kind of a bouncy synth bass line. And this one has kind of a mix of these synthesizer instruments. This is one of the lead synths. And I think, from what I remember, I did this one earlier in the week. You'd think my memory would be better than it is, but it's not. This one has alternating synth melodies, I believe. I think it switches with this one. But basically, the complementary synth melodies go higher and higher, and I don't think it layers with this one. Yeah, I guess it could. So the general vibe for this one is a bit more kind of smooth and mellow. I think this is going to be part of the chill collection. And spring, mid-spring, maybe mid to late spring. The next BGM release is going to be 2 albums, 2 very different style albums. One is the kind of up tempo, faster, electronic type stuff, and I'm gonna try and find one of those loops to show you folks here. And then the other release is going to be a lot more mellow and chill, ambient, kind of trip hop-ish inspired. So this one probably would go on that second collection. Now let me see if I can find one of the more upbeat ones. I've definitely recorded more of the chill ones than the upbeat ones. I may work some more on that this evening, as I got to get a bunch of stuff together for some of the stuff I'm coordinating for that project. But yeah, there's that one. So let me jump back through the queue and see if I can find one of the other ones. Not that one. Okay, I think this one is supposed to be part of that collection too. I don't remember exactly which one this is. Oh, this one, yeah. I'm on the fence on this, on where to put this one. It's definitely not going to go in the chill one. It's probably on the more up-tempo collection. So you have kind of a rapid rhythm and a mix of kind of like bass line and strings for the low end. And on the mids, you have this type of synth. Very reminiscent of like PS1 era video games. I do like that instrument. You know, if I feel like it's necessary, this might go into a future RPG BGM collection too. We'll see. I kind of want to save this one for something like that, like Lost Kingdom 2, which there will be another one of those, probably not till next year maybe, but this one sounds kind of like an underground or a dungeon theme. So we'll see. That was that one. Let's see if we can find one more from release 1. Since that one, the one we just showed off, probably going to be used for a future project instead. So let me step back through the queue some more. Nope, that one's a chill one. Oh, that's Cyber Choir, I believe. We did that one on stream. So there's going to be a bunch of stream ones in a row here. Go back further. Okay, there we go. I don't even remember what I titled this one. Sorry, let me turn my boost back up. So this is another one from release 1. This is a faster tempo, electronic or techno-ish song. Let's see what this one sounds like. Got a little bit of sax there. Oh, this one. This one is like a classical guitar, like a plucked classical guitar. This one I'm not entirely finished with yet. This is 4 loop tracks recorded. I'm not entirely convinced I'm done with it. So I'd like maybe a string layer, maybe like a high-end string layer as a complement to the stuff here. It's kind of simple. It has a fast rhythm and a bass line that comes in and then backs off for a little bit. So you can hear the plucked part here. So kind of been thinking about adding a string layer. Not quite sure on this one. This one's maybe 3/4 of the way finished. Okay. And then maybe we look at one more preview for upcoming project. Which one's this? No, same release. Kind of more of a. Sorry, let me fix my mic. Kind of more of a drum and bass type of rhythm. Let's see what this one sounds like. Okay, so we got kind of a rapid bass line, like a synth bass line, and then synth strings. And this fourth one, what's this fourth one? Oh, I remember what I did for this one. This one I kind of experimented with a longer alternate melody, so this would not be playing at the same time as the strings, I don't think. Yeah, this is meant to swap in and out with the strings. And so what this one really needs, this one I'd say is about 3/4 of the way finished too. This one needs a fourth instrument that's going to be a constant in between the string part going in and out, and then this synth part that goes in and out. Like maybe kind of more of maybe like a beeping type of melody rhythm that can just be in the background on the fourth track, so that when this one switches with this one, there's something else that's a constant as these two parts switch in and out. So that'll be a challenge. That's one thing I need to figure out for this one before it's considered done. And so I'm not exactly sure if there's going to be any sort of tempo switches or anything like that for this one. I think it functions a little bit better as a constant rhythm than, like, it's not really designed for a drop. Again, kind of drum and bass adjacent in style for this one. Interestingly enough, the high strings part does sound interesting when reversed because it's not completely off rhythm. It's not completely on rhythm either. It's kind of in between. I think it sounds better in its regular state than reversed, but it is interesting that you could probably use it as an alternate. Okay. Well, there you go. That's a glimpse into the future spring project that I've been working on. Again, I'll have an ETA on that one probably mid-April, maybe, if everything I'm working on works out. I am planning on working with some artists for that one too. It's not going to be at the level of complexity of like Lost Kingdom. There's no animations this time, but I do want to do some artwork stuff, so we will be seeing that probably when we get closer to mid-March, before I end up taking my break. I'll probably put a teaser out for it once I have some stuff kind of in place, because I would like to give people an idea of what's coming in that release later. And so keep an eye out for that. I'll be posting that on Twitter and YouTube once I get that together. 2 albums, 10 tracks each, 10 very different, or 20 very different styles, 10 and 10. And so I think we will call that a jam stream for today. Before we wrap up completely, let me see who's online. We can go spread the love. Hey, Takashi Sotodate. He's online. We can go raid Takashi. So let me go ahead and stop this. And we'll go to outro. So I need to explain a little bit about the stream schedule for next week. I'm going to be tied up with some stuff at the end of the week in the weekend, and I'll be working during the regular week. So there's actually going to be kind of a limited stream schedule next week, but I'm planning on being back for Dead Space tomorrow, Monday, because I really want to jump in and get a big chunk of the way through the game. So because I can't guarantee that I'll be able to stream Tuesday and Wednesday before I get tied up at the end of the week, we might do one longer than usual stream tomorrow and Monday. If I can swing it schedule-wise and start a little bit earlier, then we might be able to do a big stream for Dead Space to kind of make up for that. And then things will return to normal the following week, more or less. And we will be looking at some new stuff because Wild Hearts comes out at the end of next week. And I will be spending probably an extensive amount of time on stream looking at that. And so things will pick up after next week. And then we'll have a lot of stuff to look through. So in the meantime, thanks again for hanging out, folks. I always appreciate you hanging out and contributing to the discussion. Hopefully it was interesting. But let me queue up the stuff here and we'll go raid Takashi. Alright, we're good to go. So I'll catch you folks in the next stream and have yourselves a good evening.